Mitch is also a great comedian and has been in our Storytelling Guild for about 15 years and has quite a few good stories he could tell us. And here he comes, making his way. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Hi. So, I have been telling stories. I found the Story Guild in 2005. And in 2015, I drove past the comedy club in Salt Lake City one too many times, and I decided to try some comedy as well. And I was living at the time, that was because I was living at the time in Salt Lake, and I kept coming up here once a month, and I would make this trek once a month from Salt Lake City to Olympia, and it was great. But all of that traveling, every so often I would find myself needing somewhere to stay. And it would usually be a hotel or whatever, but one of those years between then and now, I got to go tell a story at the Port Angeles Storytelling Festival. And so I had to actually find a room, find some place to stay. And it was cool. I was poorish at the time. I didn't have a lot of funds, but all I needed was a place to stay. And so when I got onto Airbnb, lo and behold, there was a $20 all you get is a couch offer, which is all I needed. I thought that's all I'm going to do because I'm going to go and do the training and the storytelling stuff all day. All I really need is a place to crash at night. So it worked out great, but not so for my story tonight. It worked a little different for this guy, Billy Weaver. Billy Weaver was 17, and it was his first job. It's kind of an internship. He was going to work at an insurance company. And this is over in England. He was moving from, I don't remember where he was moving from, but the town was Bath. He was going to go to Bath. And he ended up on the train, and the train made him stop way too long, like one of those almost like a layover for the planes, but he had to stop in another town, and so he didn't get into Bath until almost 9 p.m. And he didn't have anywhere arranged to stay. He thought he was going to get there early enough to find a good place. And so he asked at the train station and said, where can I stay? And they told him, go down to this pub, the Bell and Dragon, I think it was called. They said, go down to the pub, to the Bell and Dragon, and you'll have, they've got rooms upstairs. And he thought, well, that's great. That'll be fine. I can go, hang out at the pub. It'll be fun. But as he was walking through the neighborhood to it, it's maybe a quarter mile away, I think they told him, he noticed a sign on the porch. And it was a nice little house, tidy and neat, but, it was still not, it wasn't like a mansion or anything. But it just said bed and breakfast. And he thought to himself, this might be better. I think this might be better than staying at the pub. Bed and breakfast, bread and breakfast. Oh, and then he started imagining things. And then he thought, oh, well, let's check it out, And so from the sidewalk, he could see in the front window, and there was a little fire burning. That was really nice. And he saw a parrot on a cage next to the fire. Like, that's okay. So if they can take care of animals, they're not probably crazy people. And he even saw a little dog on the floor napping in front of the fire. And, okay, all right, this is interesting. And so he went up to the door, and then he started thinking, maybe I don't. Maybe, it might be more fun to be at a pub, with all the other guys, and, kind of do stuff. And I don't know. But then that sign caught his eye again. Bed and breakfast, bed and breakfast. Okay, all right. So he rang the doorbell. Now, you know how when you ring a doorbell, normally it takes about, it could take 30 seconds to a minute before you hear somebody get up and start walking over to the door. He rang the doorbell, and boom, it opened right up. Whoosh! It was the sweetest looking lady. She was just a nice lady, and she said, hello. And he said, I was looking at your sign. And she goes, I know, I assumed that. He said, is there a room available? And she said, oh yes, it's all ready for you. And he said, all right, how much? And she said, oh, come in, and let's talk about this. But he said, well, how much is the room? She said, oh, it's only, I'll pick a current number so that we can have some comparison. It's only $30. And a night. This was in England, so it wasn't even dollars. But anyway, he said, basically it was a great deal, and it included breakfast. And he's like, oh, wow. She said, I can lower it if that's too much. And he said, oh, no, that's actually a great deal. I'll take it. And so she had him in, and she took him up the stairs to the landing and said, this first floor is mine. And then they went up another floor to the second floor, and she said, and this is your floor. We have the place all to ourselves tonight. There's no other guests here tonight, but here's your room. And he looked at, went in, and he was like, oh, this is amazing. And inside in his mind, he's thinking, this is just great. This is so amazing. And she says, oh, and this window over here, you'll see the sun comes in the morning. Is so great, Mr. Perkins. It is Mr. Perkins, right? And he said, oh, no, it's Weaver. And thinking, I don't think I told her my name ever yet, but it's Weaver, it's Mr. Weaver. She said, oh, okay, sorry, I'm so forgetful. He was just thinking, And so she showed him a little hot water bottle in the bed, and she said, turn on the fireplace if you need to, if it gets cold. And then she said, do come downstairs, and on the piano in the living room is the registry, is the book, I need you to sign in. We don't want to break any laws now at this point. And so he got himself ready, and he was thinking about, how just kind of weird she was, but also how sweet. She was like every person's best friend's mother, just a nice, sweet lady, forgetful, and just a little bit wacky. But he was okay with that. It was a good price. And so he went on and went downstairs, and he found that she wasn't around, and he found the registry, and he saw he was the third on the list. And he was looking at the names, as you do. We're all curious as people. And it was funny. It was a guy named Christopher Mulholland and another guy named Gregory Temple. Now the funny thing was they lined up in his head somehow. They're a match. They're like he remembered both of their names for the same reason, but he couldn't remember that reason. It was driving him crazy. He couldn't figure out what was going on, and so he started repeating the names, like Christopher Mulholland. And she said, "Oh, he was a sweet boy, so sweet." And he goes, "Oh, yeah. I was just noticing him and Gregory Temple. They have. I'm so curious. Like they sound famous to me. Like I know their names, familiar somehow." She said, "Oh, famous? No, not these two." He said, "Wasn't." He couldn't figure it out. She said, "Oh, well, come and have some tea. Come and have some tea." He said, "Sit, have some tea." And so he went and sat down. They were talking and drinking the tea, do you want milk? And he was still on about the names, and every time he brought it up, she would distract him. Christopher Mulholland, wasn't he that kid from, I remember he was that kid from Eden that was on a walking tour, and he disappeared. She says, "Oh no, Eden, no. My Christopher Mulholland was from, another college in England, Cornell or something, I don't remember. But he wasn't from that college, and he was an undergraduate." "Oh, okay," said Billy, thinking more. And then he looked at the parrot, and he said, "From outside, that parrot really fooled me. I just realized it was stuffed." And he said, it looked so real. And she said, "Oh, yes. And have you met Basil, my little dog?" And he looked and he said, "Wow, that is amazing." He said, Basil hadn't moved the whole time either. And he said, "That's amazing work. Who did that for you?" And she said, "Oh, I did it." He goes, "Wow, that's so complex. How did you, it must be, terribly hard. And she says, oh no, it's easy. I preserve all of my little pets. And then she said, come down, sit down, have some more tea. Oh, that Christopher Mulholland, he loved his tea. He was, how old did you say you were? And he said, oh, I'm 17. She said, oh, Christopher was the same age. You have much brighter teeth than him, though. And that's kind of a weird compliment. Billy said, oh, well, you should see the back. It's just the front. It's just the front. All the back is full of cavities. She said, oh, well, And then he drank some more tea, and suddenly he realized he didn't like the tea. It had kind of a bitter almond taste. And then he started to kind of phase out. And she said, you did sign the register, didn't you, Mr. Wilkins? And he said, Weaver. It's Weaver. Weaver. And he said, oh, Gregory Temple. She said, oh, he was a beautiful young man, just like you, and he had not a blemish on his skin. And Billy said, what? And he said, but hasn't there been anyone in the 2 years, 3 years since? And she says, oh no, Billy, only you. And that was the end of that story by Roald Dahl. You can find it, it's called The Landlady.